Los Angeles, I'm and most Hollywood nights. She goes to California, oh, California.
What you say about Los Angeles?
LA got the people saying.
You're listening to Corner of the Galaxy on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Welcome to Corner of the Galaxy, the show that talks 100% LA Galaxy soccer. We're glad you could join us. Now it's time to sit back and relax as your hosts navigate through the twisting, turning, but never boring world of the five-time MLS Cup champion, LA Galaxy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. I'm your host, Josh Guesman, coming to you on a Monday, June 3rd. Galaxy coming off of a soggy, wet, sideways 2-1 loss to the Chicago Fire, just their third loss of the season. We're going to talk about that game, talk about the failures. We've reached the midway point for the LA Galaxy. That's right, 17 games down, 17 games to play. Where will the LA Galaxy be at the end of the 17 games? We will certainly let you know. We will talk about it. We will get you ready. And then breaking news. Lots of Royce rumors. We're going to talk about those, plus another rumor that just dropped here as well. So a lot to get to, a lot to talk to. We're glad to have the Panda himself back in. It is the Panda, Mr. Kevin Baxter. Kev, how you doing, bud?
You got your skate key hanging around your neck there? Is that your bicycle lock? What's going on?
These are called earbuds, much like yours, you know, except mine didn't come from an airplane. So that's what that is. And by the way, I've only worn these every podcast I've ever done with you. So way to be observant. It's a wonder the CIA never hired you.
I tried.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
I was on a plane just 24 hours ago. I would have been off the plane earlier, but United once again delayed my flights. It's 6 flights in a row now on United Airlines, I'll have you know.
How many of those were due to weather?
Actually, none of them that I know of. I know of. They, at least that's not the excuse they gave us. But I'm like too indebted to United. I got the credit card and I got all the loyalty points, and I got to stick with it. The reason I was on a plane, went to your former city, Denver. I hate the airport, by the way. Thank you. I was there to see the U.S. national team in their first game under their new coach, Emma Hayes.
Yes. And how did that go?
That was a 4-0 win.
Okay.
It was very, very good. She's got a lot of work ahead of her, though. This is, it's not so much the U.S. national team is bad now. They're not. They have a lot of great players. The rest of the world is just really good. And by the way, speaking of the rest of the world, didn't it seem like the first 17 games went really fast? I still feel like we're kind of getting into the season, and I look up and we're halfway through.
Okay, here's the crazy part. Well, at least it's crazy to me. You can tell me whether or not you think it's crazy. So the Galaxy have played 17 games. They played 10 games on the road, 7 games at home. That is there. That means that they now have 7 games on the road and 10 games at home to finish off the rest of the season. Does that not seem like it's very short and then also like way lopsided, but not as lopsided as you'd expect it to be with how many games it feels like the Galaxy have played on the road? I don't know. It's this weird sort of, shift in.
Well, if you want to look at the number now, one of those home games, by the way, is going to be at the Rose Bowl, which I don't know, is that home? But the Galaxy are 3-3-4 on the road, right?
Uh-huh.
And so that means they've done most of their damage at home when they're unbeaten. And if you look in 7 games at home, they've scored 16 goals and give up 11.
Right.
That's much better than they've done on the road. So if there's anything to read into that, it could be a really good second half. Of course, you got Leafs Cup in the middle of that.
Right.
You've got other things like fatigue. They are going to get Brugman and Paintsil back after the break, supposedly from their injuries.
Yes, correct.
They're going to add a player.
Supposedly.
Supposedly that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to lead into the back of the show.
Everybody already tuned in at the front of the show knowing that they were going. I mean, it was in the title of the title. They knew it was coming. So we're going to talk about Royce for sure.
They knew Zlatan was coming back.
Yeah, that's right. I know, right? I will say this, that your phone's buzzing, my phone's buzzing. We have been working on this now for most of the day trying to nail down some stuff. So if if we seem distracted and we're trying to read and figure things out, then that is what we're trying to do as we're doing this show live. So let's get to the news that broke before the LA Galaxy went off to Chicago, and that is the news I think we were all expecting, Kevin. It is that Ricky Puig, designated player Ricky Puig, was assigned to a contract extension through the end of the 2027 season. This was long anticipated. Puig at the time had recorded 17 goals and 21 assists in 61 games played. Now 62 and 18 goals on that. And 15 games played for the Galaxy in the 2024 campaign. At that time was 13 goal contributions, 5 goals, 8 assists. It's now 6 goals, 8 assists. Whole deal. These are the quotes that we have. We are incredibly excited that Ricky has extended his commitment to the Galaxy through 2027, said LA Galaxy general manager Will Kuntz. Ricky has been an elite midfielder during his time in MLS, ensuring that he will remain a critical piece of our team was crucial as we continue our pursuit of putting a championship caliber squad on the field. And then from Greg Vanney, Ricky is a unique talent and an extreme competitor. This extension is both a recognition of what Ricky has accomplished, as well as a symbol of our mutual belief in the commitment that we can win championships with him as the centerpiece of our team. We are excited that Ricky is settled here in LA as the pursuit of our 6th MLS Cup continues. So here's all that. It's all the fun stuff. Before we get into too deep, I will say, through 2027, for a guy who said that he wanted to go back to Europe, Kevin, this yes, but
this doesn't. I think this doesn't necessarily preclude that, and here's why. First of all, I asked my Galaxy sources about the salary. Would they share anything with me? They would not. However, they did say it was very more than fair to say it was a substantial raise, and I'm going to go. We'll find out the salary before the end of the season because the Players Association will release figures in September or October. So we'll know by then. My guess is Joseph Paintsel right now is guaranteed $3.358 million this season. That's 20th best in MLS. I would bet right now that Ricky Puig goes by that number by a substantial amount. I think he's the best paid player on the team. And you notice they waited until he got the hair dye until they gave him the contract. I don't know if that was part of that or what, but this doesn't preclude him from going back to Europe. What it does mean is that the Galaxy are going to have to, whichever team wants him, we're going to have to pay the Galaxy a transfer fee. So I think it's a good deal for the Galaxy in both ways. One, if they actually do lock him up, as you said, and he's here through 2027, that's really good for the Galaxy. I mean, he's a core player. If he really does want to go back to Europe, and that's what he's angling for, the Galaxy protected themselves. They're not going to lose him, just for a little bit of money. With that kind of a contract, they're going to get a decent transfer fee for him, I think. So if you look at it from the Galaxy's perspective, I think it was smart both ways. They either locked him up through 2027 or they made sure that they were going to get a substantial payment if he leaves.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Well, I said it for you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're probably much more eloquently.
Well, see, I was going to say that lots of people were taking that to mean, that Ricky has no more ambitions, and I said I think that's the opposite. I think it's the Galaxy protecting themselves more than anything.
Yeah, very much so. And you look at what happened with Mbappe going to Real Madrid, and my understanding is PSG is getting nothing for that. It's going to be on a free transfer. Here's a guy that's been talking for years, as Ricky has, about moving on.
Right.
And PSG couldn't sign him to an extension and make sure that they get some money for that. I think the Galaxy did a good job, and Ricky did a great job too, because he's protected either way. Either he gets to go to Europe, and a team is going to pay a lot of money for him, and therefore he gets extra chances, or he's locked up a stay in Los Angeles at a lot of money, for another few years, 4 years.
I would be surprised if he is if he's not gone by next winter, not this winter, but next winter. That's just my feeling on the whole thing. I think, especially as we look at the game in Chicago and everything that's going on, I think that Ricky poses, as much as he creates, he poses problems for the Galaxy as well. And by the way, he's an extreme talent. I don't think that's the issue. But I think we've been talking about is that Ricky Puig doesn't exactly play the way that I think Greg Vanney would love for the team to play. Ricky does a lot of things that can cause some problems, and they really do like to force the ball down the middle. I think the Chicago game was probably a good example of that. So, it's just, again, it's going to be a balance of everything. I think the Galaxy are going to give it one really good shot next year with Ricky at the helm. And by the way, I don't know that there's a more talented quicker, fast-paced, fast thinker in all of Major League Soccer. His ability to take on 2, 3, 4 defenders at a time, to break lines with either passes or with dribbling through guys, to think 3 or 4 plays ahead. Talking about the Marco Reus rumors, if they put Reus and Ricky Puig next to each other at some point, those two will be thinking at the same level, as far as I'm concerned. You're talking about top-level talents and the ability to go. I mean, somebody was comparing, Messi's ability to sort of dive and dodge and break through some stuff. And I think it was somebody was talking about just Ricky Puig and how, because he's younger, because he has, I think, more quickness and more speed, that he may even be more dangerous in those particular types of situations than Messi can be sometimes. Obviously, we're not talking about them compared directly to each other, but in those situations, trying to break in between 1, 2, 3, 4 players, that because Puig has the quickness, the youth, and everything that's going for him, that he may be more talented in those little tiny spots than even Messi. That's a pretty tall comparison, but I did enjoy trying to work through that in my head.
Well, I wonder if Messi is partly responsible for that. As I told you earlier, when I was in Spain in 2019 doing some reporting, Ricky Puig was the guy everybody at Barcelona was talking about. He was there training with the first team, playing with the first team a little bit, training with Messi. I wonder, he's a similar size player to Messi. He plays a little bit further up the field than Messi, a little bit. But I wonder how much of sort of the Messi game he channeled during their time together. Right now in MLS, he's number 1 in passes attempted, number 1 in passes completed. He's completing 88.3% of his passes. He's 3rd in accurate long balls, and that's it's kind of fancy way of saying line breaking passes. His passes that break the lines, he's 3rd in the league in that. So 4th, and the Galaxy are 4th now in possession. A lot of that is because of Ricky, and you did say something interesting. If he plays side by side with Reus, how dynamic they would be with the contract. And Ricky's still talking about wanting to go back to Europe. Is there a possibility that maybe Reus is the short-term substitute for Puig if he goes?
I think it's just because of looking at the contract. And let's talk about Reus a little bit. Let's not bury it. I'm tired of it anyway. We can talk about really what Marco Reus is going on. We had multiple reports come out today. One from Tom Bogert, the LA Galaxy in advanced talks with free agent Marco Reus. Per sources, Galaxy agreed to a fee for discovery rights with Charlotte. LA Galaxy, Charlotte both had execs in London for the Champions League final. Personal terms not agreed with Reus, LA Galaxy yet. Negotiations ongoing. Then you had ones from Fabrizio Romano. Los Angeles Galaxy have sent their contract proposal to Marco Reus in order to get him to sign as a free agent. Galaxy had agreed a fee for discovery rights with Charlotte, as per Tom Bogert. Reus also received approaches from Saudi clubs now advancing in talks with the LA Galaxy. That was that. A little bit later in the day, we have Cesar Luis Merlo on Twitter, and a very reliable source, as he usually is. Marco Reus is in LA Galaxy's reinforcement. There is already an agreement to pay Charlotte $350,000 to cut priority at discovery. Once the medical exams have been passed, he will sign until December 2025 with the option of 1 more year. That is the 18-month contract that both Bogert certainly mentioned and Cesar Luis Merlo mentioned in there. I do question the $350,000 in Bogert's report. Bogert reported that Charlotte would be getting more money than anybody has ever received for any discovery rights, and we know that the current leader for that was the LA Galaxy, receiving $500,000 for Paul Arriola. There was also mention of 2 payments. Usually the discovery fee money, Kevin, isn't paid until the player actually signs. If the player doesn't sign, it's not a thing. Apparently the Galaxy paid Charlotte just some money up front in order to be able to negotiate with Reus. So that would come to 700 if that's 350 is half. So that would make Todd Bogart's report. Yeah, it would, but we're guessing that it's half. We don't know. They could have paid $150,000 up front, and then it's 350 and it's 500 again, or something like that. So we don't know what the constituents are of that. But basically, 18-month contract with a year option on the end of that. This is for 36-year-old, soon to be 36-year-old. I believe. Did he already turn 36? It was 35, and then he was going to turn 36 here pretty soon. But regardless, Marco Reus coming in. Yeah.
So mid-30s.
The other part of the reports that are out that seem to be accurate are that Reus would not receive any more than $1.7 million, which is the max TAM. Now, reports on Twitter show that Charlotte reportedly offered him $4 million, and the Galaxy will have to make up the rest with sponsorship money and all that sort of fun stuff. They have to obviously be careful of how they do that, just based on the salary cap and the league's rules, but it sounds like everything is very above board. I don't believe that Will Kuntz is going to get caught trying to do something that's illegal, knowing the guy wrote most of or some of the league rules in this stuff. So I would imagine the Galaxy are standing on firm ground for this. So
what do we know from the Galaxy? Both you and I have been reaching out to people all day, and I was basically told to go pound sand. That they weren't going to say anything, which leads me to believe that it's very close, because generally when they get that
real
close,
quiet.
it gets real quiet. Exactly. They don't want to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. What I will say about the salary is I do think that they are walking right up to that line, though. You're right. Will Kuntz helped write some of these salary rules. He's not going to violate them this early into his tenure as president. But guaranteed compensation under the MLS rules is supposed to, include things like
it's guaranteed money within the contract. If there's stuff outside the contract, though, I don't know that again.
Right. That's kind of what I'm saying is, so what that means is Royce would be taking a gamble. If it's guaranteed, team has to pay him. If they say, look, we're going to guarantee you $800,000 based on the jersey sales we think we're going to get, they don't sell those jerseys, you still get the money. The other thing would be like, hey, we're going to give you a percentage of jersey sales, and you don't sell that many jerseys, it's not guaranteed. He doesn't get that. I also think part of it, and nothing against Charlotte, but I also think part of it is a player from Europe wants to go to Miami, LA, New York. Charlotte is not a place that if they go there, they might really like it, but it's not a place that's on their radar. And I think we saw Bruce Arena have a lot of success with that in getting players to come for bargain basement rates, come to play in LA. We see LAFC is starting to do that now too. So Royce may take less than $4 million to come to LA just because it's LA and the tradition of the team, and they're not going to play on turf. There's a lot of things that make LA on the Galaxy a more attractive place than Charlotte. And he's made all his money. I don't know how much more money he needs. Certainly he's not going to play for free, right. But 1.7. And then if they can give him a little bit more on top of that with some other sort of outside deals, he's not going to be standing in line with food stamps. That's for sure.
No, he'll be fine. I think the other advantage and something, it's like, Charlotte off from $4 million, but having to play on turf as the home field is not probably conducive to his 35-year-old body. Just turned 35, by the way. 35 on May 31st. So newly 35 in that. So, but it's not conducive to a longer term contract. And quite honestly, if Charlotte's great, I actually really like Charlotte. It's a fun play. It's not LA, and I think you're going to find that's still an attractive offer to come to LA. So now we have to watch this as it plays out. I was actually told on Saturday that Royce was coming. And so that's what was unconfirmed, and I think it still remains unconfirmed. Everybody's saying that it's close. Sierra Merlo is as close as we're getting to, an absolute, hey, we just have to get through some medicals, and then that will be done. Here's the thing. Sophie sort of said it, but, he's an extremely talented player, and whenever you look at Brugman and Brugman's longevity, I don't know that you're going to be able to play him 90 minutes all the time, and especially as he sort of recovers from this knee injury. If he's able to split time, if you're able to bring in somebody like Royce in the 65th minute of these games and really be able to put him in the place where the Galaxy needs something, or, he starts some games, gives Brugman some time off, be able to switch off, really sort of split some stuff 50-50. I think you and I were talking at one point, Kevin, to some of the people around the team, and it's like, does he make the team better? And, the answer is yes, right? And so at $1.7 million, we always talk on this show about how the money matters, and in this particular case, I think the LA Galaxy have been completely truthful with what they've said, Kevin, which is, hey, we're going to go out and get young guys for our designated players. We're going to have these proven guys. They're going to be in their prime. We're going to spend a lot of money on it, the whole deal. But whenever it comes to the names, when it comes to the bigger stars that are past their prime, those are TAM players, not full-on designated players. And so in this particular case, it looks like the LA Galaxy have the room, the availability to be able to go ahead and get Marco Reus. Everything's pointing to this getting done. If he would sign, he would be here at the beginning of July once his contract is up. June 30th is usually when contracts end, and so you would find him coming in July. And if that is the case, the Galaxy still have a lot of games to play through July, and then they get into August, which is the break for Leagues Cup and everything else in that. And then there's only about 7 games that come back after you look at the Leagues Cup schedule and the end into the playoffs. So not too bad for what the LA Galaxy are trying to do. Maybe doesn't answer all the questions, Kevin, in terms of what the LA Galaxy need. Maybe looking at the Charlotte game, there's still some holes there that you would like to plug if you're an LA Galaxy fan, looking at the starting lineups and the people who played. But I don't think you can deny that Marco Reus could be a really, really good partner with somebody like Ricky Puig, understanding their ability to play sort of a two-man game. And
here's a guy that's played on the biggest clubs in Europe. He is a world champion with Germany. And just the way Will Kuntz has gone about building the Galaxy. One of the first guys he signed this offseason was John McCarthy. And what did he say about John McCarthy? He didn't say he's the greatest goalkeeper in the world. He says a good locker room guy. He's a character guy. I have to believe if they're going out and spending all this money to get to even just talk to Marco Reus and then sign him and then have to do some side deals to make it worth his while, if they're going through all that trouble, I have to believe that Marco Reus is going to be a good locker room guy. I don't know that much about him, but I don't think Will would do this if he wasn't a good character guy in the locker room, a guy that might be able to mentor a Ricky Puig or some of the other younger players. Will was at LAFC when they brought in Collini. He was great at that. He was awesome. Brought in Gareth Bale, not so much, not such a good guy in the locker room. So I think Will probably wouldn't have done this and certainly wouldn't have gone to the lengths to do this if he didn't believe that he was also going to be the kind of guy that makes an impact in the dressing room.
Yeah, you can certainly see that. By the way, we'll wrap up the Royce rumors with everything. Everything seems to be pointing in that direction, but we have one more signing rumor that has popped up here recently, and so for this, we shall give you COG breaking news. The LA Galaxy supposedly on the hunt here, Kevin, for their newest technical director, and there is a report out on Twitter. And we'll go ahead and give it to you from Farzam Abulassini. All right, there you go.
A lot of typos in there.
There's a lot of stuff in there. But basically what it says is that Michael Dencher, who is one of the first-team scouts, in fact, I believe the lead scout for FC Copenhagen, is indeed ready to sign a 3-year deal or a 3-year contract with the LA Galaxy to become their technical director. That is obviously in the spot that is replacing Jovan Karofsky whenever he departed. That's the information we have. Now, we reach out to the LA Galaxy. I was told basically that that there's nothing official on their technical director as of yet, but this is the first time we've seen a name circulate, and I would say that it doesn't seem like it's a reach to say that they could be going outside the league in order to find a technical director and somebody who would help them sort of mesh everything that goes on here at the club. So another guy to come in and help Greg Vanney, another guy to come in and help Will Kuntz, sort of mesh all the different styles together and bring something together. So again, the guy in this particular case is Michael Dencher. So we don't know a lot about him, and this just popped up whenever we were getting ready to start. So that's where we are going. And, I think having the scouting background is certainly an interesting take, right? Because you have a guy who's used to identifying talent as a technical director. Your job, I believe, and this is always fun, trying to figure out what a technical director does. But for me, a technical director is a guy who works with the coach on an established pattern of play or how you'd like to play. And then along with like your head scouting guys like Michael Stevens, you go in there and I help identify guys that can play your style in these different ways and make sure that there is a similarity in playing styles across the entire LA Galaxy organization as well. So that would be sort of the big guy. So almost like another GM, but like an assistant GM in a lot of ways. Technical director can usually help out and stuff like that. We'll actually have to get a technical director on this show because the last one didn't like some people on this show, so he didn't want to come on. So we never really found out exactly what that job entailed. But I think looking at what the LA Galaxy are looking at here with Dencher, it makes some sense that perhaps this would be the way that they are going. So
you said he didn't like some of the people on the show. There's only 2 people on the show. I said he doesn't like all of the people on the show.
I don't know that he didn't like Eric though. Like he might have liked Eric, and maybe he liked Sophie.
Well, that's another show.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Monday show.
Well, Mr. Dencher then is on the clock. He's been invited. By the way, I would guess just the way, again, the job is sort of being detailed, I would guess that he's also going to be a liaison, as you said, to the academy programs and the MLS Next Pro to make sure that if you step up from the academy or the Next Pro team into the first team and you're a 6, that you know how you're supposed to play, you know the philosophy, you already understand it. But I also think there's that part where Will and Greg Vanney will decide we need this profile of player, and then with his scouting background, working with Michael Stevens and others, then they go find that player.
Right. Makes some sense. So that is what we're looking at right now. Again, unconfirmed reports but I believe this seems like it's at least credible enough to discuss the whole deal. So now we get into the LA Galaxy and their loss to Chicago. Let's talk about the starting lineup. 2-1 loss for the LA Galaxy in rainy conditions there in Chicago. The LA Galaxy going with a little bit of rotation, putting Caceres back on the field, moving Neal back into his position on the bench. And the idea behind that, Vanny said, was that Jalen Neal was getting ready to go off to the Olympics, and so basically he wasn't going to have a break, and so they were worried about the workload that possibly if he goes off to camp and then has to go for the Olympics and everything else, that he's going to be putting on a lot of workload on his legs. So he was like, the Galaxy were very cognizant of that and wanted to make sure that they gave him a little bit of a break. The other shift that you saw was with Mikovic in goal for McCarthy, and the Galaxy have done this in their 3-game weeks, that Mitrovic would be able to go out there and play in some of these games, so he was out there. You had Cerrillo in sort of for Brugman, you had Delgado in there, you had Gabriel Peck, you had Miguel Berry in for Dejan Joveljic. Greg Vanny talked afterwards and said, they're still trying to manage Joveljic's return as he's getting through his injuries, and so they wanted to be cognizant of that with 3 games in a week. And so there was definitely some tired legs in this, and I think you saw an LA Galaxy team that in the first half didn't play very well, despite the fact that they got a handball very early on in this game, Kevin, off of Maya Yoshida header, which, by the way, if you've watched Maya Yoshida, a guy who can't buy a goal recently, he at least got one on frame in this one, and it was very clearly a handball. The LA Galaxy were able to convert thanks to Ricky Puig, and so the LA Galaxy were up 1-0. By the way, I would like to point out, Kevin, for the very first time this season, the LA Galaxy scored first and did not win the game or tie the game. They lost.
And they also scored on a penalty, which is kind of like a unicorn of its own.
Right? That's absolutely one of those crazy things. I think that...
Did you mention Jonathan Perez? Wasn't this his first start of the season?
It was his first start of the season. Jonathan Perez coming in for, and thank you for reminding me, Jonathan Perez coming in for Diego Fagundes, who is playing for Joseph Paintsil. Again, looking at the legs, looking at the amount of time and wear and tear that these guys have gone through with a 3-game week, and then watching Jonathan Perez and how he played coming into the game late in Dallas. It was sort of a reward for his play in that game. And so Johnny Perez getting in there, having a very nice showing. Now we can get into this game because as we have talked about on this show, Kevin, the Galaxy since Charlotte had done a very good job of not putting themselves in bad positions, right? Not being able to be countered, not giving the ball away cheaply, trying their best to make sure that they are playing smartly in these games. And so it is one of those things that you watch that whenever things break down, it is on the giveaways. It is on, Yamane, who was giving away the ball in the first goal. It was on Edwin Cerrillo, who gave away the ball in the second goal. The Galaxy trying to force things down the middle. If you talk to Greg Vanny afterwards, like I did, he talked about just their lack of control of the game, especially through the first half, and not really being able to put together the way that they wanted to play and forcing everything through the middle. When you force things through the middle, you're able to be turned over. And whenever you turn it over in the middle, then you have problems getting back and defensive problems, everything else that goes through. So on a general sense, that's why the LA Galaxy lost this game. I would say that Vanny, while he was impressed with Johnny Perez and what Johnny Perez did, thought that there was a lack of shape in this game, Kevin. He thought that perhaps there was a little bit too much of running everywhere and trying not really establishing a shape. And if you go back and watch some of that first half, I think that's probably pretty true in a lot of things. The other big deal was that Chicago was playing a 5-man back line. A 5-man back line, as we know, has frustrated the LA Galaxy before. Not everybody can play it, so it's not in everybody's wheelhouse. But when you have a Chicago team who hasn't won in a really long time, going in there, a little desperation mixed in with some rain and a 5-man back line, it really sort of put them into a good spot to be able to counter the LA Galaxy. The other big problem for the LA Galaxy was Miguel Berry. And it has been, I think, for a little while here, Kevin. And I don't think it's surprising. The Galaxy had to have known that somebody was going to get some time in this game, right? Like if when you start the season, you're like, Joveljic can't play every game. And so they went out and they got Miguel Berry, and they were like, this is going to be our backup. And, from the discussions I had, it was sort of, hey, Miguel Berry, we don't know what we're going to get from him, but we expect that whatever we get from him for the price, it's actually a pretty good deal for us, right? Like it's something that it's like, okay, we're not expecting too much. We just want him to go out there and be able to do some good things. against the 5-man back line, I will certainly say that Miguel Berry was gone. And basically, Vanny talked about how they were able to swing one of their defenders in the center, whether it was the left defender, the right defender, the left center defender, the right center defender, anything. But basically, they were able to just mark Miguel Berry everywhere that he went. So he had a man shadow everywhere he went, and they were able to switch off. And the Galaxy weren't dangerous enough through that back line to really cause any problems. They weren't putting enough bodies into the box that were really going to cause any problems, and they were probably impatient whenever they did that. So the bottom line is that Miguel Berry, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to have the ability to find spaces. I would say, his one goal on the year was obviously a really good goal for him, but he hasn't looked real dangerous in the scoring department. And I think the LA Galaxy's, expected goals and everything else that sort of come off that sort of show that, especially in this particular one.
Well, that's what that 5-man back line will do for you if you play it right. They had Carlos Terán, which is on Barry the whole game. And if the Galaxy are coming with 3 forwards, which essentially they did most of the game, you put one guy on each one of those guys, you still have 2 extra players in the box, playing with that 5-man back line. But this has been a problem for the Galaxy all season. And yes, Miguel Berry is part of that, but whenever Joveljic doesn't play, they have problems generating any offense. And that's why you see Ricky Puig leads the team in shots, which is good or bad. Good and bad, I think both. Yeah, Ricky Puig is very offensive minded. He's a very good scorer. He's second on the team in goals and assists, but he's not supposed to be doing that. He's supposed to be playing a little bit more upfield. He's supposed to be the playmaker, not the play finisher. And so when you see Ricky Puig leading your team in major offensive categories and your center forward is sort of non-existent, that happens too often when Joveljic is not here. We talked about this going back to the preseason, that
Right.
They were putting all their cards on Dejan Joveljic. He's produced. He's been good, but he hasn't been able to play every game. And when he doesn't play, what do you do then?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that we should certainly point out is the LA Galaxy lost for the 3rd time this season, right?
I think 2 of those 3 games they could have won.
Oh,
I think the Austin game was the only one that was like, you disagree. You think the Chicago game, Austin, they didn't show up. That
Austin was a bad game.
The LAFC game, a draw at least, I think the Galaxy should have come away with. This game, I thought they had their opportunities as well. Their possession, they were like at 65% possession. Again, they're 3rd in the league in possession, or fourth in the league in possession. I mean, they outshot Chicago. They played well on a wet field. They just didn't generate the kind of offense they needed. Most of their shots were not good, good percentage shots.
Well, and that's the whole thing. So, you can sort of look at, and I know a lot of people are criticizing the substitutions. That's why I asked Greg Vanny about it, which was, about Jonathan Perez. And Johnny Perez, looked dangerous and looked like he was providing the speed. The fun thing about Johnny Perez is, Kevin, you don't get Joseph Paintsel, but you get some speed like Joseph Paintsel. So you get the ability to sort of stretch things, and with Peck on the other side, you're able to do some similar things, not the same, but similar things that you can whenever Paintsel is there. The bottom line was that Vanny saw that and said, one, that he didn't think that Perez was necessarily playing in the defensive spots that they needed to, or at least being put into the positions that they wanted to be in order to advance. And so whenever he brought Joveljic on in about the 67th minute, if I remember correctly, let's see, 61st minute. Let's go back to it and just see what the 60th minute. In the 60th minute, the idea was to put Joveljic up top with Barry, because with the 5-man back line, and we saw this from Greg Vanny in last year and other years, with the 5-man back line, they wanted more forwards, that way they could be able to draw out more defenders, that way there would be more space in there, right? That was the idea. So you put Joveljic up there and you play Barry up there, and you hope that they can play off each other. And for the most part, we haven't seen that work a whole bunch in what the Galaxy are trying to do. I will say that I thought the best chances the Galaxy had were in that second half, were where the Galaxy were trying to do it. Outside of the penalty kick, and let's go to expected goals here for a second, because it's actually a pretty interesting little stat whenever you try to break it down. So you get about 0.7 for a penalty kick, right? So that means the Galaxy have their 1.7. So 0.7 of that is a penalty kick. So the Galaxy had a 1.0 from the open play, roughly, expected goals. You had Chicago with a 0.9, right? So they were really similar in terms of their expected goals. Now, Chicago scored 2 goals off of that. The Galaxy only got 1 off of their 1.7. So it was Chicago who was probably a little luckier, especially on that second goal with that long shot from, I believe it was from Kuipers, and it bounced off 2 posts and still went in, right? Usually if it bounces off 2 posts, it goes out. But he had that shot there and was able to score that one. So the Galaxy are sort of in this hole. You're allowing Chicago to sort of play, but the 1.0, a lot of that came from Joveljic being on the field there. A lot of it came from Cuevas coming in whenever Cuevas came in on the right-hand side and put in some good crosses. Fagundes was eventually able to go in there, and I know people were expecting Fagundes a little bit earlier. In fact, I thought Fagundes would get the last 20 minutes. Instead, he got about the last 10 minutes, plus 10 minutes of almost 10 minutes of stoppage time in that as well. So you got Fagundes finally, like what you would sort of expect in a position that you would sort of expect. Hey, this is on the Galaxy. Don't give up the ball the way that they did from the defensive side. Don't turn over the ball in the center of the field whenever you don't have defenders back, and you don't have any of these problems. Both of the goals that Chicago scored were self-inflicted wounds, and you can't fix that with whatever offense you're trying to fix it with. I don't love Miguel Berry being into positions where he's starting, but I certainly understand the fact that you probably couldn't have started Fagundes with all the minutes that he's been putting on his legs. You probably couldn't have been starting Joveljic with all the minutes that he's been putting on his legs with all the injuries and stuff that happened last year, and then him coming off of injury earlier this year. There is no logic to people who tell you that playing the third game of 3 is not a extreme stress on the body and everything. It doesn't matter if you have the week off after. It's about what you're able to put out in output for that third game. And so I thought Vanny had to rotate. I would have loved to seen subs earlier. I don't know what the status is on some of those guys. Sometimes those guys, like he's been talking about Ricky Puig having a knock and him trying to gauge some of the things that he's going through and when to pull them and when not to pull them, right? I know that we've talked about Mark Delgado battling through things. I wouldn't be surprised if Diego Fagundes is battling through things right now, and Dejan Joveljic just coming back from injury. Overall, on the road in the third game of 3, it's disappointing result only because Chicago have looked very bad, but Chicago was very motivated in this game as well.
But, what we haven't even said yet is that snapped a 6-game unbeaten streak. I mean, the Galaxy have been hot, and I don't know why they have this midseason break, but they do. We're halfway through the season. The Galaxy have now a full week off. And Greg Vanny talked about that afterwards, because Paintsill now should have a chance to maybe come back. Brugman's expected back right after the break. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Ricky Puig and Diego Fagundes, and certainly Joveljic a little banged up. They all get time off. This break is coming at a great time for the Galaxy, which is what Greg Vanny said afterwards. He said the break comes at a decent time for us mid-season. I'm pretty happy with the point total that we have in the first half of the season. I think we've let a couple of opportunities get away, but he said, I think we learned a lot about ourselves in the first half. And if I had come to you in February and said the Galaxy will be 7-3-7 halfway through their season, I think, and they would be tied for third in the Western Conference.
Right.
I think you take that. Now, I'm not sold on this team, and I'm still sticking with the thing I said at the very beginning of the season, despite all the numbers and everything we're talking about. I think the Galaxy are a very good team. I think they're going to certainly make the playoffs. I think they're going to win a couple of playoff games. I have just not seen anything that makes me think they're a Supporters' Shield or MLS Cup contender. I think they're, a good team. But you and I have both covered MLS Cup champions with the Galaxy and I with LAFC. There's always something special about those teams. And it's hard to put a finger on. But every break seems to go their way. They dominate when they're supposed to dominate. They don't lose games they're supposed to lose. They're just different. It's a different animal. And you have to, I know a lot of fans were with those Galaxy teams in 2011, 2012, 2014. If you remember back to those teams were just different. This is a really good team. This is a team that is going to have a good record at the end of the season. I just don't see this as being competing to be one of the best 2 teams in the league.
I mean, we'll see. Right now, I think if you're looking at Supporters' Shield, likely contenders for that, I would put, Real Salt Lake up there in the Western Conference. I'd probably put LAFC up there, just the way that they're playing, playing recently. And then there's probably not a lot left whenever you go to the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference is a little bit tougher. Cincinnati, Columbus, probably in there somewhere whenever you look at those. So, I think that the Galaxy are going to have to find themselves in this next 17 games. I think they're a good team. I don't know that they're great yet. I don't know that they've learned all their lessons. And now that's sort of the question is, what is the next lesson? If you had to give the Galaxy a grade so far through the first 17 games, how would you grade them?
I think I'd give them a B+. But I think the real measure is how would you grade them compared to last year? While you recover there, you need to go to urgent care. Are you okay?
Literally why I push the mute button, so that way you can talk and I can keep going. So how about you do that?
I'm just watching you. No, I would give them a B plus, but I think when last season at this time of the year, I probably would have given them a C minus. So they've really pulled their grade up. Like I said, this team is really good, and it's come a ton of distance from this point last year. Remember at this time last year, we were just a few weeks away from the Chris Klein firing, and the team was just horrendous. And they sort of turned it around and made a little bit of a run. When you look at where that dysfunctional team and what Greg Vanney was trying to accomplish with that team, which we still don't know what it was, and you look at the way this team is playing, this team has a clue, has an idea, has a culture, has a style of playing. It's kind of night and day difference. But still, a B plus. I don't think they're an A team just yet.
Yeah, the Galaxy right now with double the points that they had last year through 17 games. So 14 points through 17 games, 28 points through 17 games in 2024. The LA Galaxy still under the best ever start by Greg Vanney with the LA Galaxy. 31 points in 2021, 1 point better than 27 points in 2022. So right now, 2021, 2022, and 2024, very similar in everything that is happening. The real deal for me is that the Galaxy, in terms of eye tests and everything else, look better than they have in those previous years. And so that's sort of where I sit.
Those other teams, remember that I think it was the first team, they had like a 14 game unbeaten streak, still an incredible streak in the middle of the summer. They're not going to have that this year because Leagues Cup's going to intervene. But I think Greg Vanney's first, 3 teams, they were really streaky. And again, we're saying this of a team that just had a 6-game unbeaten streak, but they were not consistent from game to game and week to week. They were streaky. They were really poor for a period of time. They were really good for a period of time. This team seems to be much more consistent. They seem to be consistently good. And when you look at their numbers, they're going to score, they're on pace to score 62 goals. That's pretty good. They'll give up 50 goals. That's a little high. That might come down. 56 points. That's pretty good. That's definitely in the playoffs and having a home game in the first round.
Just remember the 50 goals, that if they finish with 50 goals this year, only allowing 50 goals, they would be 17 goals better than the previous season. 17. That's basically half a goal better per game over the year.
But still 50. I mean, 50 seems a little high to me, doesn't it?
It is. It's not like the best number ever in the entire world. If you go look at the LA Galaxy and the goals they have given up, some of those really good teams in 2014, 37, 2011, they gave up 28 goals. 47 goals in 2012. So that would be pretty close to 50 whenever you look at it. I still think the defense has some growing to do. Mostly it's about ball control and how they want to play. But bottom line is, I think a lot of people are blaming Greg Vanney for the subs and everything else that is coming through. I will say, I think the stats probably prove out that the Galaxy were a little bit better on the attacking side whenever they did go to the 2 forwards. I just don't think it panned out for them. By the way, by like millimeters, they only got 4 shots on goal. Chicago only got 4 shots on goal. This was not a great offensive game for the Galaxy, and really the offense is the part that has bailed the LA Galaxy out so many times this year. We just didn't see that in this particular game.
Well, if you're going to give Vanney a hard time for substitutions, hey, he's using the guys he has. He's limited to what he has on the bench. I mean, he has to pick from that group.
Yeah, but
that's another.
He's also responsible for like those guys, right? So like,
I was just going to say that's why Marco Reus is a good signing, because all of a sudden, how much better does that make your bench when you can, as you said, we've been told that Marco Reus is not coming in to be a 90-minute a game guy. That can change when he gets here in great shape. Maybe he plays 2 positions. Who knows what happens?
Right.
But the idea is you got a guy like Marco Reus coming off the bench in the 60th minute, 65th minute, and maybe starting in spots here or there. That's going to make your team a lot better. And all of a sudden, Greg Vanney's substitutions look a lot better.
Well, I mean, and the other thing is that when you look at the bench in this particular game, they had the guys off the bench that you thought could make it. They had Diego Fagundes on the bench. They had, Dejan Jovalic on the bench. They had Cuevas on the bench. The Garces is still sitting there. Everybody's just clamoring for Garces to play. He'll play whenever he's ready to play. Don't worry. I imagine after the break. That's what I'm thinking. So that's where it is. Let's get
he's not going to play before the break.
Well, maybe he will. Just nobody will be around. Adam with a $2 super chat. Thoughts if Vanney will have a contract extension? I think too soon. I think the Galaxy are going to wait on that too. Listen, they expect to have a home playoff game. That's their expectation. And if Greg Vanney can't deliver that, then maybe that's the measure. I will say this. There's a lot of people who are like, hey, get rid of Greg Vanney, and don't understand that Greg Vanney is widely revered as one of the better coaches in all of Major League Soccer. I hear it all the time whenever I talk to other reporters covering other teams. There's a lot of teams that would love to have Greg Vanney as their coach, and I know a lot of you. And by the way, there's some of you who are just like control, copy, control, paste every time they get Vanney out, time to get rid of him. Every time, all 3 games the Galaxy have lost, get Vanney out of here, that type of thing. So I'm not that way as well. I'm not that way, but I do think that he's obviously he's playing for his job, right? This is his job. He will be, I believe, out of contract at the end of the year. So whether or not the Galaxy want to extend that and when they want to decide to extend that, that's up to everybody.
Well, unless they've silently signed him to a contract extension, which we've seen before, he is out of contract at the end of the season. I think he, has to make the playoffs, has to have a home playoff game, has to win that playoff game. I think those are 3 essentials. That doesn't mean if none of those things happen, he doesn't get re-signed. But I think to really have a reasonable shot of getting his extension, he needs to do those 3 things. Now, the second playoff game, it's luck of the draw. At that point, you could go on the road to LAFC or Real Salt Lake, depending on where you finish in the standings, and that's a roll of the dice. And I don't think you can necessarily hold that against Greg Vanney. I think he has to do those other 3 things. The other thing is if you let a coach go, all these fans that want to fire Greg Vanney, okay, well, who do you bring in?
Right.
You have to have a better coach to bring in, and there's nobody there right now.
The other problem is that obviously that's an LA Galaxy problem as far as fans are thinking. That's not my problem to figure it out. I just know I don't like this guy, right? I don't like this guy. This guy has to go. So, I can say that I'm just wary. I've seen a lot of coaches come through. I've seen a lot of changes. The other thing that is sort of seems to be lining up, and if you've been paying attention for long enough, is that the Galaxy seem to be lining up very nicely next year in terms of the players they'll have back and the things that are lined up. So do you want to spend that time changing styles of play? When you change styles of play, you have to change a whole bunch of personnel as well. It would be a very big undertaking. So I wouldn't be surprised if the LA Galaxy stick with Vanney at least through the next year, just because of that reason.
And if they sign an extension, it's not going to be a 1-year extension. That's a death knell for a coach because players know they can wait him out. If Joseph Paintsel, for example, doesn't like the way Greg Vanney's using him, he dogs it for a year, or whatever player. They dog it for a year, wait for the coach to be fired, and they get another coach in. So giving a coach a 1-year extension just doesn't work. It's got to be generally 3 years, and if a team has to eat the back half of that, then they eat the back half of that. Yeah. But I think Vanney had come in and said he had a 3-year project to build this team. This is the 3rd year. It's almost feels like it's begun again, because remember at the start we had the French Connection. The Cabral and all those guys, that didn't work out. I think Greg Vanney's argument, if he were to needed to make one, would be, look, I finally got the team on the field that I want. They're playing the way I want. Let me see this out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that. Again, I would venture you head on over to Corner of the Galaxy, where Catamount wrote an article about Ricky Puig, how he fits into the system and what problems he creates for the Galaxy. It's really interesting, just to sort of put it in a paradigm. Not saying Ricky's bad, not saying Greg Vanney's system doesn't fit what Ricky is doing, but they're all trying to figure out this stuff. You want to talk about a guy who probably very much can play Greg Vanney's system? Talk about Marco Reus. That makes a lot of sense. Let's get to a $2 super chat. Is there still money for a striker? Thanks, guys. I don't know. U22, so. Well, there's a U22 spot available. So if you wanted to spend a U22 spot on another striker to back up Jovic, you could do that. And I think there's a good enough argument that you kind of have all the other positions sort of covered in terms of what you're backing up. I know there's people who are like, oh, you need a new goalkeeper. That's not happening. There's 2 of them. There's 3 of them technically. But there's 2 of those guys. They have that figured out. That's locked in. That's not going anywhere for this season. So that's not happening. Some people say center back, and then I beat my head against the wall going, how many guys do you want to play 2 positions? There's like 5 guys who play 2 positions right now. So I would imagine you're okay with that, and we haven't even seen Garces yet. So that doesn't make any sense. The right back with Cuevas covering, Cuevas actually played pretty well coming in. He hasn't been asked to play a whole bunch of defense, and he hasn't got a whole bunch of minutes, but we're getting some experience for some of these guys, like Aguirre, again, like Cuevas. You're seeing Johnny Perez finally get some of those minutes that I think rightfully he's earned in some of those places. So you're getting those guys. So where else are the Galaxy sort of missing? Defensive midfielders sort of covered with Cerrillo, and you're covered with Delgado, and you're covered, listen, is it a perfect fit or a swap for Delgado to come in and play, a defensive mid? Cerrillo's kind of the only 6 the Galaxy have. But he's good enough. And then you have Aguirre in there who can come in and play a 6 if you need him to. So there's coverage there. where else are the Galaxy thin except at striker? So the problem is the U22 spot is probably going to have to be the right player at the right time in the right position, and I'm not sure the Galaxy are going to spend the money in that position in this summer window, which is, I think it's going to be disappointing, but I also think that they're going to have to start playing some alternative strikers up there. I don't think you can keep putting Barry up there. You'd have to put Fagundes up there, or you need to do, some other guys. I still think Barry's going to play because there's too many games that the Galaxy are going to have to play in too short a time. And that being said, that means there's rotation, and that's some things that are sort of going out there. So it's a hole in the roster, and I don't think the Galaxy would argue against that.
Let me take a shot at that question too. I was surprised when Marco Reus became the guy that they apparently were targeting, because we know they don't have any DP, so it's not going to be a big signing. They're not going to go get a Messi or a Suarez. They're not going to get a big name because they don't have any money. So they get Marco Reus as a TAM player, and you think, well, that's not really a position of need. Well, it could be. I mean, if he is able to sort of spark that offense from the midfield, he's a great player. He's a name player. He's a guy that's going to make a contribution. He's coming in at a relatively cheap price. But if the fans and you and I can recognize they need a striker, I mean, it's apparent. That means Will Kuntz knows that too.
Right.
You're right about the U22. They might be able to do it that way. They don't have the money and the DP spot to go out and get a big name. It might be a U22 guy. That could be a little bit of a gamble, or it could be a Billy Sharp type. Billy Sharp is not coming back, but a guy like that, someone that comes in that you try to get some production out of for 6 months. The Galaxy are very weak at striker right now. Joveljic is having a great season, but when he can't play, everything halts. And so you bring in Marco Reus and say, well, yeah, he's gonna get the ball up the field. He's gonna deliver it into the box. Deliver it to who? There's nobody there.
He could play the false 9 as well. He could play actually into that 9 striker spot. You could have formations that have Brugman on the field and Reus on the field and Puig on the field and Delgado.
But that's a makeshift. That's a sealing wax and duct tape sort of thing.
Oh yeah, but you're doing it with like 2 of the top football minds on the field. I mean, you can't discount the talent that Marco Reus brings you, and if in those positions, instead of playing Barry, you play a false 9, I don't think anybody's going to argue that you can't put bodies into the box and balls on net whenever you're looking at trying to fit some of this in, putting Fagundes in whenever Paintsel comes back out. There's lots of options to do this. I'm a little surprised we haven't seen Vanny experiment more and sort of exclude Miguel Barry a little more than maybe he has. But that's really, I think, the second 7. I always feel like the first 17 games you're learning about the team, and the last 17 games is you applying what you learned, right? Through additions and then also through tactics and things. You have to apply what you learned. And if you don't, then you're not adjusting to what you're seeing.
Well, I think the thing with Miguel Barry is he was brought in for a specific role. He's a veteran. He's getting decent pay. He's not going to, he's not going to buy a team with that money, and he's a veteran. He's a journeyman. He's been around. I think the Galaxy said, look, this is your role. And they gave him 17 games to play his way out of it. Like, they had to give him a little bit of a longer runway because he's a veteran player and a guy that's been around. Maybe they have finally seen enough now, and maybe that will change. By the way, one other thing, when you talk about bringing players in, there was a big deal with the Marco Reus thing of who had the discovery rights to him, which is a stupid idea to start with, but we understand why they do it. Who had the discovery rights? So I asked the Galaxy, I got some emails and text, and people were saying, who did the Galaxy have discovery rights on? Because each team does. The Galaxy said that information is not public. They would not share it. There wasn't an upside to that. And so for me, that meant I can say whoever I want they have discovery rights on, and they're not going to deny it. So I think the Galaxy have discovery rights on Mbappe. I think they have discovery rights on Guesman. I think they probably Cristiano Ronaldo. Who do you think? I think
Pele.
That, maybe
Pele.
Pele.
David Beckham. They went back out and put David Beckham on their discovery list again.
Holland.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the entire country of Germany is on the LA Galaxy's discovery list.
If the Galaxy want to deny that, that's fine. But until they do, we're going with that.
Gary, by the way, $5 super chat question for both of you. If you had to get rid of one forever between juice, all juices, Kevin, so tomato juice, orange juice, lemonade, all those things that are juice, or soda, what would you be? If you had to get rid of one, which one are you getting rid of? Are you getting rid of juice, or are you getting rid of soda?
Soda's gone.
See, I want to say that too, because that sounds like the healthier option. Hey, I'm going to stick with the juice. And I understand that means that my vodka and lemonade's no longer available, right? That is something.
Let's see, vodka and orange juice, and now you got a screwdriver. Right?
Well, that's why the juice is better, because you mix more alcohols with it. Although Have you heard of something called a dirty Dr. Pepper? It was on a different show. Anyway, there's some half and half involved with Dr. Pepper, and
all you got to do is ask yourself: could you go without orange juice, or could you go without Coke? And I can.
Can we say Coca-Cola? Can we say Coca-Cola? I don't want people to think it's the other. So Coca-Cola or Pepsi. Ugh, gross.
Dr. Pepper. A Diet Dr. Pepper is good, but if I had to go without a Diet Dr. Pepper or without orange juice for the rest of my life, first of all, tomato juice. Don't even mention that.
Right.
For me. We're talking about orange juice versus all sodas, and I'll take the orange juice.
Here's
and mix it with rum. It's really good.
Here's my problem. This morning, for instance, like I got up and I had to be out at a job site at 6 a.m. So I was up very early this morning, having to drive up. And I was like, man, I need something to kickstart this day. So I had an orange juice at home. And then I went and I was like, I'm still thirsty and I need some caffeine. And I'm not a coffee drinker. And it's hard to find tea whenever you're like on the move quickly. So I was like, we're going and I'm getting a Dr. Pepper in the morning, right? Not a healthy choice. I all agree. You don't have to tell me. And that Dr. Pepper got me through. So, I mean, it's really hard for me to say get rid of soda, but I think that's probably the correct action is to get rid of soda.
Especially since you occasionally wear sodas on your way through the in and out line.
It hasn't happened in a while, but thanks for bringing that back up because I'm sure it'll happen again. Every time I grab the cup now, I'm constantly worried.
Interesting super chat.
Yeah, Lasso, $5 super chat. Hello, gents. All right, I'm over this loss. This year's success would have been a pipe dream last year. Still a lot of season to go. Just believe, baby. Believe. That's what Lasso says. Adam, $2 super chat. Joveljic was in good form from last game with a brace. Absolutely. And the idea is that you can't play Joveljic or start him in that third game because he's coming off an injury and you have to rest legs. Here's the thing I want everybody to remember. If you're hearing this podcast and you actually really put yourself into Greg Vanney's shoes, you guys probably would have gotten people injured by now because you never want to not start the starters. You never want to rotate. You never want to do anything. You have an unhealthy obsession with Johnny Perez, and he's just feeding that now that he's playing well. So,
you know what it goes back? It's the video game culture because in a video game, no one ever gets tired. You play Joveljic 90 minutes every game, and he never has a hip pointer problem, never has an injury. The one thing I would ask though, and anyone who's played the game, I know you've played the game some. So Joveljic needs to be rested because he can't play 3 games in a row. And so you don't start him, but you bring him in for the last, 25 or 30 minutes.
Right.
That seems to defeat the purpose. I mean, if I'm a coach and I'm going to rest a guy, he's there on the bench, watch the game, have a soda.
So there's actual metrics. They actually track this stuff. This isn't like guessing games. They actually know recoveries from guys. They know how much, like you can literally, they can go in because they wear these monitors and they're tested and they're checked by all of the nutritionists and all the physios and all this stuff. They actually know recovery percentage and stuff like that. So you could be like, oh, well, Joveljic is really only 50% recovered from the Wednesday game. So you know what? If you try to play him for more than, 45 minutes a day, you're really sort of pressing it. He's not going to be able to give you too much. This is less guessing than people really think it is. There's still an art form involved, but there's actual data. And that's something that nobody has over here. But they absolutely know what people's recoveries look like. They will give them special drinks in order to help boost their recoveries whenever they have like slower recoveries. It may mean that some guys don't go out and play, that they go out and just do a recovery day because they're like, hey man, these guys didn't recover from the 90 minutes. Like you look at somebody like Mark Delgado, who was supposed to get the night off against Dallas and instead ended up having like a monster night and played all 90 minutes. That was probably based on his recovery rates. And they're like, hey, this is going to be a lot to try to recover from this, right? And instead he had to play anyway and he, forced his way through it. So this is the stuff. They have this data. This is not so much guessing.
I get that. I was actually at Liverpool's training facility once many years ago, and Jurgen Klopp had just started. Anyway, the point was the players would come off the field, and there would be nutritionists there that would hand them all special drinks. And she told me that like a midfielder gets this drink and a forward gets this drink. Goalkeepers just basically get tap water.
Right.
She said they don't do anything. They just stand there. But still, I think my point is still a valid one. I understand they track all that stuff, but I'm just saying if you're giving a guy a day off for fatigue reasons, give him the day off. Don't give him 2/3 of the day off.
But how do you justify that reasoning in your head? Go ahead. Just try to, hey, Joveljic, you don't play at all. Just go home. We don't need you. Oh, wait, we might need you for 20 minutes, which you're perfectly capable of giving us. We don't want to give you 90 minutes because that would be too much. You'd be stressing yourself. We're worried about your injury. But the 20 minutes I'm going to give you sounds great. It's well within your recovery period. You're good. How do you justify that, Kevin? You would get fired so fast as a coach.
The 17th game of the season in Chicago, I just don't give the guy the day off. If the guy needs a day off, he needs a blow, give him the full day.
Maybe you shouldn't have sent the team on the plane to Chicago. You could have just forfeited the game and you wouldn't even had to show up. And then there's a break afterwards, right? So I mean, it makes some sense.
Your Delgado point was a good one, though. You need to bring your best 18 players to the game because you don't know who's going to pull a muscle during warmup. If Miguel Perry pulled a muscle during warmups, guess what? Dejan Joveljic plays the whole game.
He does.
I'm just saying, if you've decided that Miguel Berry is going to start, Jonathan Perez is going to start, we're going to give you the day off. Give him the day off.
Okay. It's crazy.
And that's why I'm not a coach.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. Charlie, $2 super chat. Can Royce sort his paperwork by July 1st? We are expecting, and everybody's talking about, an early July arrival. It is important to talk about that as well. Here is the schedule for the LA Galaxy coming up through the rest of June. You have the June 15th game, play against Sporting Kansas City, who have been woeful. Peter Vermees is right on the edge of getting fired. It is right there. He's going to have to agree to walk away, but he is right there on the edge of everything. Then the LA Galaxy will host New York City FC. That is a short turnaround time. So the 15th and then the 19th for the LA Galaxy, and then it's off to Real Salt Lake. Really tough game for them. And then off to San Jose. And then we get into the July 4th game coming up, LA Galaxy, LAFC at the Rose Bowl. 3 days later, the LA Galaxy host Minnesota. If the LA Galaxy can sort Royce's paperwork by that beginning of July timeframe, and I think July 4th. I'm trying to even remember when the transfer window's open. Check when the summer transfer window opens. I'm trying to remember. It's like the first. I don't think it's the first. I think it's like the third or something like that.
But look at that. They got 4 games in 13 days.
They do. They have a ton of games to play. So all this stuff is going to happen rapid fire. But if you can get Royce in there, the earlier you get him in, the more impact he's going to have on your season. Because basically it goes through July 31st here, where the Galaxy have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in July. You're done July 31st, and then you have one more game in August, and then you go into Leagues Cup.
But look at that. There's 4 out of those 5 games are at home. I don't think he makes his MLS debut in Dallas in July, because if he did, he'd get on the next plane out of Dodge.
He would leave real fast, right?
Yeah. Go back to June for a second. There's something interesting with that Kansas City game. I mean, look at you have that's the 3rd game in a 1 week window, and they have to go to altitude and play there in Kansas City against the conference leader.
You mean Real Salt Lake? Real Salt Lake.
Excuse me. I mean, that talk about it's the same thing. You know, they had 3 games in a week, and the 3rd game was on the road. They just finished that stretch. Same thing again. Only this time the 3rd game is at Salt Lake at altitude.
Yep.
I think you're going to see Greg Vanney approach his rotation a little bit differently. Maybe that middle game is the one that a lot of guys sit out.
Yeah, it very well could be. Adam, $5 super chat. Rose Bowl game in 5 games. Time went by fast. Will you guys be covering the game, or will you be with family? Are you going to be at the game, Kevin?
I will be.
Have fun. Enjoy it. You know. 1, I don't like the Rose Bowl, and 2, that's a good family day for me.
Go back to that. Go to the July schedule again, because there's something there with that Rose Bowl game. So basically, they play the Rose Bowl on the 4th, and then they're home on the 7th. I don't know how many people are going to make that game on the 7th, because they'll still be in the Rose Bowl parking lot 3 days later.
Very well could be. Very well could be. Good joke. I enjoyed it.
That will make sense to everyone who's ever been to a game at the Rose Bowl.
Angelino, $2 super chat. Any 3rd kit news? Shoes look great. Can't wait. I have heard information. I know that the LA Galaxy are starting to warm up all of the marketing devices here for the 3rd kit reveal. I have heard that people who have seen it have absolutely been blown away. I have not seen it, so I cannot tell you, but there's a lot of good vibes headed that way, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's an absolute knockout. But if you've seen some of the shoes leaks and stuff like that, you can sort of see. I think Ricky Puig, if you go back to his announcement that they said good news is coming, there was actually it looked like a 3rd kit colorway scarf in his locker as well. So it's coming. It's coming, and I think you're going to like it. Everybody really liked it. So that's what I'm hearing so far. Lots of good things out of that. All right.
Hey, by the way, that Ricky Puig announcement, he's sitting in the locker reading the newspaper, right?
Uh-huh.
Wasn't even the LA Times. What's going on there?
It's Kevin Acevedo's Quasar Weekly, don't you know? So, which you can follow on Twitter, apparently. So I'm told it is absolutely not a rehash of LA Galaxy Insider. It just feels that way, so don't worry about it. It's some interesting stuff, so you can go follow that on Twitter.
Never happened to LA Galaxy Insider.
I know. Yeah, that's where we're at. I think you look at the LA Galaxy through this, only 3 losses, big deal. I think I would hope the Galaxy had a couple more wins and more out of the ties. I'd take a couple out of the ties than where they are. Really, if you give this LA Galaxy team 6 more points, and take away 2 of the draws, that would be a huge boost to what they're trying to do right now. As we look at the Supporter Shield, LA Galaxy in 8th right now, 28 points. Miami 35 points. That's your leaders in the clubhouse, so to speak. Eastern Conference, Miami is up there with the 35, and Cincinnati right behind with 33. You have Salt Lake 33. You have LAFC at 30. You have Minnesota at 28. The Galaxy at 28. Games played. Minnesota's played 2 less games than the Galaxy, so excuse me, they're doing just fine. So that's where we sit, Kevin. You look at all these games, you look at the Galaxy and where they are. I'm actually pretty pleased. We've seen some really good soccer this year. We've seen some eggs a couple times. We've seen some bad games, but overall, pretty impressed with everything so far.
Anyone who's down on the Galaxy right now, I get it. You want them to be better than they are, but would you take 7-3-7? After 17 games, if I told you that's where you were going to be, I think everyone in the world would have taken that. And I think the second half could be really exciting, especially at the top of the Western Conference. The Galaxy looks like for sure they're getting Marco Reus. He's going to make a difference. LAFC is going to get Olivier Giroud. That's going to be a big difference. I mean, some of these midseason acquisitions, you look at a team like Miami, I don't think they can do anything. I think they're stuck, and they're going to be missing Messi for 2 months now.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Galaxy, and LAFC and some of these teams that have the space to make some of these midseason moves, they're going to be different teams. The Galaxy did, and again, the last thing is that, as Greg Vanny said, this break is probably coming at the best time for the Galaxy because the next month is going to be so tough, and they're going to have a chance to get some guys rested and healed. Some of those niggling injuries that we know have been bothering guys hopefully will go away. The timing on this is really good. The only drawback would be they were playing so well, and maybe the fact they lost that game going into the break is actually a good thing,
right?
Because it leaves them with a little bit of hunger, and you really don't want to go into a break when you're got an unbeaten streak. You want to keep playing at that point.
Yeah, we'll see what it ends up being for excuse me, what it ends up being for the Galaxy. All right, as it goes for Thursday's show, no show on Thursday. We'll be taking that off. Unless there's some giant breaking news that we must talk about on Thursday, we will let Thursday skate by so I can have a little bit of family time.
Could be some breaking news.
Never know. So we'll certainly take a look at that. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or can we go?
Yeah, I think you need to go. I think you need to go take care of yourself.
Yep, just a cough.
We'll have a Dr. Pepper.
Same thing I have every year at this time. So really, that's where we're at. So all right, if you're looking for Mr. Kevin Baxter on Twitter and X, it's at KBaxter11. Head on over to LATimes.com where you can find all of his writing about all the different sports that he's covering, including soccer sometimes. So head on over to LATimes.com and at KBaxter11. If you're looking for me on Twitter and X, it's at Guesman, at Galaxy Podcast Corner, thegalaxy.com. Head on over there, our YouTube channel, Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, all that fun stuff is right there for you, so check it out. All right, for Kevin the Panda Baxter, I'm Josh Pato Guesman. You've been listening, you've been watching to Corner of the Galaxy from the box on cornerofthegalaxy.com. Halfway done with the season. We're ready for 17 more games. Let's get it going. Have a great one, everybody.
You've been listening to the Corner of the Galaxy podcast on cornerofthegalaxy.com. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Galaxy Podcast. And be sure to check out and subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, and Facebook by searching for Corner of the Galaxy. Fans, we thank you for listening. We ask that you be kind and courteous to your neighbors as you leave the podcast. We thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you again. Until then, I'm Michael Araujo, and on behalf of the entire Corner of the Galaxy crew, goodbye.